of the star wattage compared to Professor Hockfield. Many of you may be asking yourselves, an assistant professor of chemistry, what did Tim the Beaver cancel at the last minute? But there's a very good reason that I was asked to defend the latke, and it's because of the centrality of chemistry and biology in this debate. In fact, the stakes of this debate are much higher than possibly many of you realize. I will endeavor to prove to you tonight that the latke, as a nutritional supplement, leads to enhanced cognitive function, while the hamantaschen, sadly, leads to a grim, slow, and painful death. The argument goes as follows for the latke. Latkes enhance cognitive function due to their structure and their function. I, as a chemist, again, we're moving from not only the high ranking to the low ranking, but from the world of platonic forms to the world of real forms and structures. As we descend into the grubby world of real forms and structures, it's appropriate that an assistant professor take us there. Next slide, please. The structure of the latke is very simple. It's potato and oil. Next slide, please. Looking at the molecular level, the potato is principally composed of starch, which is a hydrophilic polymer, and that is, it is more soluble in water than in greasy solvents, such as oil. Oil, on the other hand, is a lipid environment, very hydrophobic. The latke, then, can be viewed structurally as a hydrophilic cavity in a lipid environment. And therefore, one can easily see that the latke will allow permeation of charged solutes, such as ions, through the lipid environment. Therefore, the latke can be viewed as equivalent to the protein ion channels of the human nervous system. These proteins are critical in establishing transmembrane electrical potentials, which are the basis for electrical signaling in cells. Slide, please. Of course, I don't have to tell our president. I don't have to tell her anything, believe me. Ion channels are important, therefore, for cognition. All of cognitive processing takes place at the level of electrical signaling. So, the ion channel is important for cognition because, as we all know, this is MIT, more channels are better, more of anything is better. If you have channels, you're smart. More, you're smarter. And if you have a diet that's rich in latkes, you are the smartest of all. Sadly, the story for the hamantaschen is not so bright. My esteemed colleague, Professor Kastner, has talked to you about the triangle. And it's true that the triangle is a noble form. Unfortunately, the hamantaschen in its triangular form is, in fact, innocuous. But it only takes a few bites to convert it to its active toxic form, recently discovered. Next slide, please. A partially nibbled hamantaschen is isomorphous to a protein-cleaving enzyme found in pathogenic bacteria, such as Vibrio cholerae, the infectious agent in cholera. Yeah. Look at that. I mean, you can't argue with structural biology. Now, the hamantaschen is large and indigestible, so diffusion is slow. You don't have acute toxic effects from it. But over time, it will degrade proteins such as collagen, which provide the structural basis for all of your connective tissue, and eventually leaving you a puddle of goo, a pile of bones, and a partially nibbled hamantaschen because it acts catalytically in the reaction. So, to sum up, your choice as a consumer of Judaic snack foods is clear. This straightforward, uncontroversial structural argument demonstrates a choice between a life of intellectual productivity and enlightenment and a slow and painful death. I leave the choice up to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Licht. And now I'd like to call on Professor Wolf to talk about... Okay, Professor Sadoway to talk about the hamantaschen.
I don't know what's going on in the chemistry department. Madam President, you need to look into that because as a material scientist, I want to begin by comparing these two foods from the perspective of how molecular structure dictates bulk properties, but I'll dispense with the similarities and shapes and get to some real structure-property relations, and then I'll turn to the question of materials processing, and finally I'll consider the broader social context of their means of production. So let's start at the molecular level. In the latke, we see primary covalent bonding with a good deal of cross-linking thanks to high-temperature synthesis in peanut oil. As retained oil congeals, the latke age hardens into a monolithic indigestible mass. Aged latkes are known to cause severe gastric disturbances as they are highly resistant to digestive agents, including specific enzymes as well as hydrochloric acid. In the extreme, latkes can close the pylorus, necessitating surgical intervention. That's the truth. Now, in contrast, the hamantaschen, with their gentle secondary bonds, mostly van der Waals and hydrogen bonds, pose no digestive threat. No digestive threat. Unlike the latke, the hamantaschen is designed to be eaten. The open molecular structure of the pastry with its connected porosity enhances flavor, and the high specific surface area enhances digestion. The filling is an aqueous gel thanks to the sugar and pectin contained therein. Hamantaschen are delicate and should be best stored in inert gas or vacuum at low temperature to reduce oxidative age hardening and to prevent hydrolysis. Latkes, of course, are immune to hydrolysis and make excellent shields to high-energy radiation. Bonding informs energetics. Let's compare these two foods using nutritional metrics. May I have the first slide, please? Okay, so what we have here is hamantaschen latke and the L to H ratio, which you know from 3091. So you can see that the latke is about 1.5 times more caloric without the sour cream. I know people talk about applesauce, but I've never seen anybody eat them with applesauce. On a sodium ratio, they're 4-to-1. On a cholesterol, they're 6-to-1. On fat, they're 7-to-1. The latke is not health food, okay? Now, let's talk about processing. The latke, fried in peanut oil, the disposal of which becomes an environmental problem. You need EPA permits to cook this stuff, okay? The hamantaschen baked in the oven, their preparation poses no threat to water or soil. Now, for the broader social context of materials processing operations associated with the manufacture of latkes and hamantaschen. For this, I'm not an expert, but I know I need to go beyond the narrow confines of the scientific. For this, I turn to the article by Robin Leidner of the University of Pennsylvania Department of Sociology entitled Latke versus Hamantaschen, a materialist feminist analysis. What? Here we have vignettes based upon interviews with people who have prepared these foods. I quote, first, let us turn to the latke. It's Hanukkah. The children are overexcited and rambunctious. Perhaps guests are expected. Much of the holiday meal has already been prepared, but the cook feels obliged to provide fresh latkes, not reheated ones. After peeling, grating, frying, batch after batch, in spitting oil, the cook is exhausted and sweaty. Her hair hangs in greasy clumps. Her knuckles scrape raw. Her arms sting from continual splatters of oil. When at last a heaping plate of latkes is ready, she brings them to the table where they are snatched up immediately. Stoically, she heads back to the stove to begin frying the next batch. From the dining room drift peals of laughter, snatches of conversation, a splat of applesauce, applesauce, and bad research, and shouted inquiries about when the latkas will be next ready. Excluded from the community, she spends most of the holiday meal on her feet in front of the hot stove. The dominant themes here include physical suffering, pressure, social isolation. The picture for hamantaschen is very different. A special time is set aside for unhurried hamantaschen activity. In general, several family members cooperate in the production of hamantaschen. Even very small children enjoy taking a turn, rolling out dough, plopping spoonfuls of filling onto circles, and pressing corners to form triangles. The scene is one of mutual enjoyment as children, their faces smeared with pure butter, prune butter, pardon me, help cut out circles of dough. Older members of the household guide their efforts and praise their helpfulness. Participants are often moved to sing. A wonderful aroma fills the home. The theme that emerges here, fun, nostalgia, togetherness. For women, it is clear that hamantaschen offer far more scope for self-realization, egalitarian relations, and social progress than do latkas. So I ask you, given the weight of such evidence, why would anyone state a preference for latke? Is the answer culturally determined? Is it genetic? In his remarks to the National Bureau of Economic Research, Larry Summers, president of Harvard University, asserted, and I quote, "It does appear that on many, many different human attributes, height, weight, propensity for criminality, overall IQ, mathematical ability, scientific ability, there is relatively clear evidence that whatever the difference in means, there is a difference in the standard deviation and variability of a latke-loving and a hamantaschen-loving population in favor of the latke." You're puzzled. So it should be quite straightforward how we interpret these remarks to come to the conclusion 180 degrees from those of a president of a university named after a subway station. By all measures, the latke is the superior delicacy.
Thank you, Professor Sadoway. And now I'd like to call on Professor Lewin, who I think is going to give us a demonstration of some sort.
We are here to compare the latkes with the hamantaschen. And as scientists, we should really do that in an objective way. And with all due respect for my opponents, most of what they said this evening couldn't stand the test of objective scientific scrutiny. And that is really a shame, because after all, we are MIT. We are a scientific institute. This evening, I will meet the same high standards as I have in all my lectures. Scientific objectivity and scientific honesty. We eat hamantaschen at Purim to celebrate the victory of the Persian Jews over Haman. Haman was a criminal. He wanted to kill all the Jews. In Israel, the pastry is called Oznai Haman, which means Haman's ears. And this makes reference to a very old custom when the ears of criminals were cut off. Now, to cut